Welcome to the world of sci-fi stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. Humanity's Armada arrives. The enemy never stood a chance. The arrival that shook the galaxy, the Zirac Dominion had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Their empire stretched across hundreds of star systems. Their fleets crushed any rebellion, and their warlords demanded absolute obedience. No species had ever challenged them and survived. But then humanity arrived. At first, the Zirac barely noticed them, just another small primitive species expanding into space. They had seen this before. Young civilizations always grew ambitious, thinking they could cling a place among the stars. The Zirac let them be, expecting them to either destroy themselves or submit when the time came. But humanity didn't. Northeast instead. They spread faster than anyone expected. Their colonies reached distant star systems. Their technology evolved at an unnatural speed. In just a few centuries, they had built a fleet large enough to be noticed. The Zirac High Council, sitting in their great war chambers on Dracor Prime, debated the threat. Some belied humans were no danger, just an aggressive species that would soon fall. But others saw something different. Humans weren't just expanding, they were preparing, and that was unacceptable. The Zirac made their decision. They would crush humanity before they became a real threat. The Z Fleet, a force of 10,000 warships, gathered at the Veros Nebula, where humanity's expansion was most aggressive. There they would strike first, and by the time humanity realized what had happened, it would already be over. The warlords were confident this was nothing new. They had done this to 100 other species before. Humanity would burn just like all the rest. But then something happened. A strange energy signature appeared on their long-range scan ERS. It was coming from deep space, far beyond known trade routes, beyond any human colony. At first, Zira officers dismissed it as a sensor glitch, but then the signal grew stronger. And then they saw it. Thousands of ships, silent, motionless, but huge. The Zirac fleet scrambled to respond. Their ships powered up weapons, shields, and scanners, trying to analyze what was coming, but no data made sense. The human fleet blocked out the stars. Every Xi commander who looked upon it felt something they had never felt before: fear. But that was impossible. Humans were not superior to the Zirac. Their technology was supposed to be weaker. Their fleets were supposed to be smaller, yet here they were unmoving, as if they had been waiting. Then the Zirac's communication channels were flooded with a single message. It was not a demand, it was not a threat, for it was a statement. This war is already over. And in that moment, every Xi commander knew they had made a mistake, a terrible mistake, because humanity had not come to fight. They had come to end it. The silence before the storm. The Zir fleet had fought 1,000 battles. They had conquered entire civilizations, burned homeworlds, and crushed rebellions. Before they could begin, they had never feared any enemy until now. Humanity's fleet did not move. They simply floated in space, an endless wall of warships that stretched beyond the Zirac's scanning range. No threats, no demands, just an overwhelming presence that made the Zir commanders uneasy. Admiral Kryos, the supreme leader of the Zir Armada, clenched his claws as he watched the holographic display of the enemy fleet. He had expected a battle. He had prepared for a war, but what was this? Why are they not attacking? One of his officers asked. Voice tense. Kryos had no answer. This was not how wars were fought. The Zirac had expected a violent response, desperate human ships firing in panic. Instead, the humans simply existed, their fleet like a shadow over the battlefield. The Zirac warships powered up, their weapons, shields humming to life. They had had the numbers, they had the experience, they just needed to strike. First, Kryos took a deep breath and gave the order, lock onto the nearest human vessel, fire all weapons. 100 Zirac warships launched their first strike. Missiles streaked across the void. Plasma beams roared toward the lead human battleship. Energy torpedoes lit up the darkness, all converging on a single target. And then nothing. The attacks vanished before reaching the human ship. No explosions, no impact. It was as if reality itself had erased them. Silence fell over the Zirac command. Center impossible, one officer whispered. Cryos' claws tightened around the edge of his command chair. This was not war, this was something else. The human fleet remained silent. No return fire, no counterattack. They simply watched. For the first time in Zurich history, their enemies did not acknowledge them as a threat, and that was far worse than any battle. The Ghost Fleet's first move. Admiral Cryos had never known fear, not in 1,000 battles, not even when entire worlds had begged for mercy before his fleet. But now, sitting in his warship's command chair, he felt something cold settle in his chest. The human fleet had not retaliated. Their warships remained motionless, their weapons silent. They had simply absorbed the Xur's most powerful attack. Without a response, Cryos turned to his officers, their eyes flickering with unease. Fire again, he ordered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. All ships maximum payload once more. Thousands of plasma beams and torpedoes streaked toward the human fleet once more. The attacks disappeared into nothing, not to reflected, not absorbed, just gone. The Zurich officers looked at one another, confusion turning into something far worse, dread. And then, for the first time, the human fleet moved. It was subtle. A single warship, dark and massive, drifted forward. Just one. The Zir fleet numbered in the thousands, yet the humans sent only one forward. It was an insult, a display of absolute confidence. Cryos' mandibles twitched. They think they can intimidate us with tricks. He slammed his fist onto the control panel. Destroy that ship. A Zarek battleship, the Vorik, powered up its main cannon, a weapon capable of tearing moons in half. The plasma beam roared to life, brighter than a star. It struck the lone human warship head and enveloping it in white-hot destruction. A silence filled the Zurich bridge. Then the plasma faded. The human ship was still there, untouched. The bridge crew froze. That was impossible. No shield technology in the galaxy could withstand such firepower. No material could endure such heat. Yet the human vessel sat there, mocking them with its silence. Then, without warning, the Vorik vanished, not exploded, not torn apart. Just gone. 1 second, a massive Zurich battleship floated in space. The next, there was only empty darkness, no debris, no wreckage, no distress signals, as if it had never existed. Terror spread through the Zerich fleet. What did they do? An officer stammered. Cryos' claws dug into his armrest. He tried to give orders to do something, but his throat was dry. Then, for the first time, the humans spoke. A deep, calm voice echoed across the Zurich fleet's communication channels. Leave now. Just 2 words, but it was not a request, it was an order. And the Zurich knew with horrifying certainty, if they did not obey, they would all vanish into nothingness. The psychological warfare begins. The Xi fleet, a force that had conquered entire civilizations, now set frozen in space. Their most powerful battleship, the Vorik, was gone, not destroyed, not crippled, simply erased from existence. Admiral Cryos felt his breathing grow shallow. What was this? No weapon in the galaxy could do that. No technology could make an entire warship vanish, and yet the humans had done it without firing a single shot. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any battle. The Zur officers whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with panic. Then it started. One by one, Zur warships began to malfunction. Their shields flickered, their weapons powered down, their engines refused to respond. Systems failing, an officer cried. Impossible, we're under no attack. Another shouted. Cryos' claws dug into his command chair. This was not a battle, this was something else. The human fleets still had not fired a single weapon, and yet the Zerk ships were falling apart. Cryos opened a secure channel to the High Council on Dracor Prime. This is Admiral Cryos, he said, his voice shaking. We have encountered an anomaly. The human fleet static. The transmission was gone. His claws trembled as he tried again. Command. Do you read me? Nothing. All communication lines have been severed, not jammed, not disrupted, just gone. The Ziak warlords, the rulers of an empire that had never lost a war, did not even know what was happening. Then, for the second time, the humans spoke. Surrender. 1 word, a simple demand, and yet it sent terror through the entire Zurich. Arma. Cryos turned to his officers, expecting defiance. But all he saw was fear. For the first time in his life, he realized something. Chilling, the Zurak were not at war, they were prey, and the hunters had arrived. The collapse of the Zurak war effort. Admiral Creo, breathing was shallow, his claws dug into his armrest, his mind desperate for a plan. But there was nothing. The Zor fleet, the greatest Armada in their EMP empire's history, was powerless. Weapons were offline, engines were dead, communication with high command was severed, and the human fleet still had not fired a single shot. The silence was unbearable. Cryos turned to his officers, expecting defiance, but instead he saw terror. They wanted to run. "Sir," one of his commanders whispered, voice unsteady, we should retreat." Retreat. The word had never been spoken in a Zurek war council before. The Zurek never ran from battle. They were conquerors. They were warriors, and yet here they were paralyzed by fear. Creos forced himself to think logically. "If we don't retreat, we are finished. Pull back." He finally shouted, "All ships retreat to Dor Prime." The order was given, but nothing happened. "Sir, our engines aren't responding," an officer said, voice shaking. Cryo blood turned to ice. They couldn't even run. The humans had trapped them. Then something even worse happened. On B1 Zur warships started disappearing. No explosions, no debris, just vanishing. The bridge crew watched in horror as entire battleships blinked out of existence, gone just like the Vorik. Creo heart pounded. He slammed his fists on the control panel. "Open a channel to be humans." A moment of static, then connection established. A single human voice came through, calm, cold, unstoppable. "You were warned." Creo swallowed hard. His throat was dry. His empire was dying around him. He took a deep breath and spoke the words he never thought he would say. "We surrender." For the first time in Zurek history they had lost, and the war had never even started. The empire falls without a battle. The words felt like poison in Admiral Cho's mouth. "We surrendered." No Zur commander had ever spoken those words. No Zur fleet had ever been defeated. And yet here he was powerless, helpless, defeated without a single battle. The human fleet remained silent. Then, for the first time, they moved slowly, methodically. The colossal warships drifted forward, passing through the frozen Zur fleet like silent predators moving through frightened prey. Creo officers watched in horror. What are they doing?" One of them whispered. "They don't need to do anything." Another murmured, "They've already won." And they had one by one. Zurek warships shut down completely. Their power cores went cold. Their life support systems flickered. Their weapons remained useless. Entire fleets were now dead in space. Across the Zur Dominion, word spread faster than light. The High Command on Dor Prime received the message. Humanity, the war that was supposed to be a swift victory, had ended before it even began, and now Zur leaders faced a terrifying question. Would humanity stop at the fleet, or would they come for the homeworld next? Panic spread through the Empire. Warlords abandoned their posts. Governors fled their world. Citizens whispered in fear. And still humanity did nothing. No attacks, no demands, no occupation. They simply waited. And in that silence, the Zurak Dominion began to collapse. Without war, without destruction, just fear. And that was the most terrifying victory of all. The surrender heard across the stars. Across the galaxy, the unthinkable had happened. The Zyra Dominion, an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years, an empire that had never lost a war, was crumbling, not because of a battle, not because of an invasion, but because of fear. The surrender of Admiral Creos had spread like wildfire. Zerich fleets, once feared across the stars, began surrendering without a fight. Some simply abandoned their warships, leaving them to drift in space. Others tried to flee, only to realize that their own people no longer had faith in them. And on Drakor Prime, the heart of the Zerk Dominion, panic ruled. The High Council, the ruling body of the Zur Empire, gathered in their great war chamber, faces twisted in fear. "The fleet is gone," one of the warlords hissed. "The humans have done nothing." Another muttered, voice shaking, They could have destroyed us, but they didn't, and that was what terrified them the most. Humanity could have crushed them, but instead they simply waited, and in that silence the Zurak were destroying themselves. Finally, the Zurak Emperor stood. His voice was grim. We must do the only thing left to us. He said. The entire chamber fell silent. Everyone knew what he meant. For the first time in their history, the Xur Dominion would surrender, not just their fleet, not just a battle. The entire empire. The transmission was sent, a desperate plea broadcast to the human fleet and the entire galaxy. The Xerec Dominion surrenders to humanity. We yield completely, a message that would be remembered for centuries. The surrender that shook the galaxy. The unanswered question. The Xerec Dominion had fallen across the galaxy. Species that once feared the Xerec washed in stunned silence. Entire worlds tuned in as the once mighty empire bowed before humanity. No one had ever seen the Xur surrender before, and yet humanity had crushed them without firing a single shot. The galaxy was in chaos. Reactions across the stars on the trading hubs of the Thar Confederation merchants whispered, if humans could destroy the Xerac without fighting, what could they do to us? In the war councils of the Vorka supremacy, battle hardened generals trembled. Are we next? And on the distant worlds of the Live Collective, the leaders of a once arrogant civilization held secret meetings. We must prepare. If humanity decides to conquer, there will be no stopping them. But humanity did nothing. No invasions, no demands, no conquests. They simply waited. The Xeric's fearful plea, desperate and broken, the Xur leaders sent another message. Humans, please, what do you want? The galaxy held its breath. What would humanity demand? Would they take the Xeric homeworld? Would they enslave their people? Would they wipe them out completely? The answer came in a single message: nothing. And that was the most terrifying response of all, because it meant one thing: humanity had never seen them as a threat to begin with. The Xeric, once conquerors of the stars, were nothing to them, and now the galaxy wondered if the Xerac were nothing, then who was the warning to the galaxy grand final? The Xi Dominion was no more. Their fleets, once feared across the stars, were either abandoned or surrendered. Their warlords had fallen into exile. Their once mighty empire had collapsed without a single battle. But it was not just the Xeric who had been shaken. The entire galaxy was watching, and now every species, every empire, every warlord, every civilization that had ever dreamed of conquest was afraid, because if the Xerac, with all their power, had fallen without a fight, then what chance did anyone else have? Humanity's final message. The human fleet still hovered in silence, an unstoppable force that had never needed to strike. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they began to vanish one by one. Their massive warships disappeared into the void, slipping into the unknown, as if they had never been there. And before the last human ship vanished, they left behind a single message, a warning, a truth that would echo across the stars. For generations, wars are fought by the weak. The strong never need to start one. Then they were gone. The aftermath. A galaxy changed forever. The galaxy, which would never be the same. The Xerc home world remained intact, but its people lived in shame and fear. They had once ruled as conquerors. Now they were nothing. The other empires hesitated. The war-hungry Vorka disbanded their fleets. Unwilling to risk the silent judgment of humanity, the expansionist Faller stopped their colonization efforts, afraid of stepping too close to human space. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, the Thur, who had once planned their own war against humanity, erased every document mentioning their plans, because now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was not just another species. They were not conquerors. They were something far worse. They were the ones who decided whether wars would even happen, and in their silence they had spoken louder than any empire in history.